Hey guys, John Velasco here with VR Source. I've had the PlayStation VR since it launched and I had a lot of fun using it so far. Played a lot of games, doing a lot of reviews for it right now. But early on, in that first week of using it out, I did run into some issues relating to the VR tracking. Now, first of all, it does utilize older technology in comparison to what we find with the HTC Vive, the Oculus Rift. Of course, if you have one already, you know how it works. There's the PlayStation camera that you position, and it tracks the LED lights that are found throughout the headset. Now, because it uses this type of implementation, I did see some tracking issues early on in that first week with the PlayStation VR. For example, when I was using the headset, sitting down or standing up, not moving a whole lot, I would actually see in the virtual world the plane or the area just shifting. And it didn't happen too frequently, thankfully, but it was still enough to notice it. Another issue I saw related to the tracking of the PSVR was when I was playing Batman Arkham Vr. So in the game, you use the PlayStation Move controllers and they act as your disembodied hands. And every now and then, for some odd reason, when I was using the controllers, my hands would float away from me and they would come back or reappear once I moved the controllers again. So that was another instance of the tracking system kind of not working correctly. So even though these tracking issues weren't happening all the time, they were enough just for me to notice. And I looked it up, did some research, and found out some ways to actually fix some of these issues. And since I did these things, it seemed to work for the most part. And I gotta say, now the tracking of the PlayStation VR is better than it was during my first week of using it. So these are some tips that you can do to fix the tracking issues. So the first thing I did was actually move the placement of the cameras. When I first set it up, I had it above the television set thinking it was gonna have a better vantage point looking down when it comes to tracking. But when I started looking up these tips, they said to move the camera. So I moved the camera a little bit. Instead of being up top, I put it below the television set. So it was pointing upwards. And while I wouldn't say this is gonna be the big fix to improving the tracking issues, it was one step in this giant process that kind of helped everything out. The next thing I did was turn off any light sources behind me in the playing area. Now, when I look back and think about E3 2016 and when I first started doing demos for the PlayStation VR, I realize now that I was playing all the games pretty much almost in the dark. There was very little ambient lighting around except for the television set in front of me, but there was no other light sources around. And of course, seeing that it's tracking those LEDs, I would assume that any strong light sources would conflict in that tracking. So you want to do that, turn them off behind you. And the last thing I did was to recalibrate the PlayStation VR headset. I believe this is something that I did initially when I first got it and set it up. But in any case, I did it again after turning off those light sources, moving the PlayStation camera below the television set. There's a section for the PlayStation VR in the settings menu where you can do this. And basically, it just runs through these prompts. So you just take the VR headset, you position them and line them up accordingly to where they are in the PlayStation camera. And I guess it looks at those LEDs to calibrate everything. And you do it in all sorts of positions, so the front, sides, and the back. And after all that was done, it seemed to correct the issue for me. So since I did these steps, it seemed to correct the issue with the tracking. I'm no longer experiencing any of those issues. Of course, there's still the occasional time when I block those LEDs. There might be some tracking issues, but that's expected given the implementation here. But I'm no longer seeing my disembodied hands floating away into space, or if I'm standing still, the VR world shifting slightly. It just seems to work a lot better. So if you guys have any other tips about correcting these tracking issues with the PlayStation VR, feel free to let us know. Let me know. If you guys want to learn more about this, you could check out our website, VR Source, your source for all kinds of reality.